Just Business with Steve Thomas and John Worrell. And now, here's your host, Chris Leary.
Support for It's Just Business comes from Manscaped, the best in men's below-the-belt grooming. Manscaped offers precision-engineered tools for your family jewels. Ready or not, the holidays are here. Still struggling to come up with the perfect gift for that special someone in your life? The answer is Manscaped. The Manscaped Perfect Package 2.0 is the perfect gift this holiday season. It includes the Lawnmower 2.0 trimmer, the Crop Preserver anti-chafing deodorant, and the Crop Reviver toner spray, which is infused with cooling aloe vera to keep you from sweating, sticking, and smelling. Trust me, she will love the manly scent of these products. It even comes with a pair of Manscaped boxer briefs to keep you feeling fresh all day long. Manscaped has redesigned the electric trimmer. Their new Lawnmower 2.0 has proprietary advanced skin-safe technology to prevent nicks and snags, has a rechargeable battery, and it's waterproof so you can use it in the shower. Stop using the same trimmer down below that you use on your face. So what are you waiting for? Head over to manscaped.com now and get 20% off your order and free shipping by using the code BIGHEADS. That's 20% off with free shipping at manscaped.com. Promo code BIGHEADS.
Hello and welcome to another episode of It's Just Business on the Hogstye Network, the show where we look at the dollars and the cents of the sports media, industrial, business, entertainment complex. I'm joined by the Hogstye Ringmaster, Steve. Steve, how you doing today?
Doing all right. Well, thanks very much. We're recording this a couple days after Christmas, so I hope everybody had a decent Christmas / Hanukkah / what other holidays are? Kwanzaa. I've never really known what Kwanzaa is, but I know it's a holiday of some type. So if you celebrate any of those things, I hope you had a good one. And it's funny because Christmas is actually the most commercial thing ever. It fits right into a business show because it's really, one of the biggest business holidays of the year. Or, biggest business events of the year, rather.
Yeah, especially, the Black Friday now that, I love that they keep extending it. Now it goes through Travel Tuesday, and as someone who's a regular vacation traveler enthusiast, the travel industry has co-opted the Tuesday as Travel Tuesday, which is when you're supposed to book all your travel and deals. And pro tip, there are good deals.
Oh my God. We've really gotten away from the true meaning of these holidays, I really disgust.
I love the Steve anti-capitalism rants.
I know, because it doesn't fit with me at all, So what have I turned into? Hillary Clinton? But it's just part of me says, you know what? I mean, if you celebrate Christmas, you're supposed to be celebrating the birth of Jesus Christ. Hanukkah is celebrating the liberation of the Jews from something, and I can't remember what. But if you celebrate that, there's a meaning behind it. And I don't know what Kwanzaa is at all. Somebody educate me. But, I mean, at least for Christmas and Hanukkah, there's a true meaning behind it. And sometimes I think the commercialism, buy this, buy that, buy this, buy that, goes a little bit too far for my taste, which is, again, extremely ironic.
Yeah, no. It tickles me. All right, well, let's get to the topics of our show, which are more overtly and understandably crass commercialism without a spiritual undertone, and that is, of course, sports and the business of sports. And, fitting for the reason for the season, NBA has definitely co-opted Christmas Day very smartly. It's about I'd say a 25-year trend. I think I even remember, the beginning of it when I was in high school or early college, where you just kind of, crash out and fall asleep on the couch and not exactly know what NBA game you were watching, but there would be an NBA game on. And they fully rule Christmas Day. So we'll start with an NBA story about another wild set of innovations that they are looking to impose on the sports watching world, and that is some radical proposals about their regular season schedule. We checked in on this story, I'd say, maybe a year and a half ago when the rumors of an in-season tournament started to kind of trickle out of the league office. But now we have reached a level of formality with some proposed changes, including the infamous in-season tournament. Steve, you want to run down what just the bullet points of some of the other proposals?
Yeah. Okay. So, what the NBA is considering here is reducing the schedule to 78 games, number one. Number two, having an in-season tournament, possibly in Vegas. And then number three, reseeding, well, a couple things. Play-in games for the playoffs, meaning that, because in the NBA, how the playoffs work is the top 8 seeds get in both Eastern and Western Conference. They have proposed having a play-in games wherein the 7 and 8 seed have to play the 9 and 10 seed in a one-game playoff, a.k.a. the NCAA March Madness tournament, or for that matter, the baseball playoffs, that kind of thing. And then number three, reseeding the Final Four. Once you get to the Eastern and Western Conference championships, just reseeding those teams 1 through 4, and 1 plays 4, 2 plays 3, regardless of conference. So it's those three proposals. And spoiler alert, I hate all of it, despise all of these things. So that neatly fits better into my conservative nature. Why are they changing something that isn't broken? I really hate all this stuff. But those are the proposals. And let's just say this to start with. They're not talking about reducing the number of games for purposes of like load management, anything like that. The reason why they're talking about reducing the schedule to 78 games is to allow for this in-season tournament. So make no mistake, it's not to protect LeBron James' health at all. It's just for this tournament. So I could go on and on about this because I just despise it with every fiber of my being, but Chris, why don't you start? Because we can have a more rational view than what I'm about to say.
Well, I just want to let the record show that the in-season tournaments is a horrible, stupid idea. I said it whenever we talked about it last time. It makes no sense. It's pure circus, and I think it would be a very dumb move, and I think it would cheapen the sport. So I'm on Team Steve on that one pretty solidly. However, I think the other ideas actually make a good amount of sense. I've been a pro reduce the regular season in all non-football sports my entire life, with my focus squarely on the NBA and the NHL. I think they play too long regular seasons. I would argue that about baseball too, but I know that's sacrosanct, so I'll leave that aside. NBA and NHL play too long of seasons. It's because they've expanded their playoff formats to be 7-game series at all levels. That may have been different when you're playing 5-game series, but the playoffs are too long, the regular seasons are too long. You've got hockey into practically July. NBA drags on too long. So that makes a lot of sense to me just right there. 2, there is nothing dumber than an 8th seed NBA team. So I love the idea. The difference between the 7th and the 9th or 10th seed and some of the is minimal. So play-in, and I know the purists, everyone said the world was going to end with the Major League Baseball wildcard play-ins. It didn't. People love it. It does well. It was a success for Major League Baseball on the ways that they hoped it would be. And so I would see that probably replicating itself here. Also, I'm for reseeding playoffs as a general philosophy. I think the NFL needs to look at it. You can't see Steve shooting himself in the head, but I'm a big believer. We're about to see the loser of Seattle, San Francisco have to go to probably Philadelphia to play a road playoff game. That just doesn't make sense to me. I think all the major sports have their, probably with the exception of baseball, have their versions of that, and I think those ones all make a lot of sense.
I would rather invite Satan to stay in my guest room for a long weekend than reseed anything. To me, what is the point of even having conferences if you're just going to ignore conferences and divisions? I love the idea of saying, okay, you got to get out of your division to, get benefits in the playoffs, then you got to get out of your conference. You have to get out of your conference to get into the finals. I love the idea of fighting through all that. So reseeding them at the end makes zero sense to me whatsoever. I mean, yeah, there have been years when there's been a dichotomy in talent between the Eastern and Western conferences for sure. But I love the idea of having to fight through conference to get to the NBA Finals. And in terms of these playing games, I mean, it's not the worst idea in the world, but really the 10th seed. When is the 10th seed ever going to have a winning record? Nobody who doesn't have a winning record deserves to be in the playoffs. The thing about it is, at the baseball playoffs, a much lower percentage of teams get in. It's hard to get into baseball playoffs. There's teams that never get in the baseball playoffs ever. Whereas basketball, more than half the teams, get into the playoffs. So you're going to expand it more? Who cares? I just don't think that it's going to matter. The 10th seed isn't going to beat anybody ever. They just aren't. They might win one game, a play-in game, but they're not going to beat anybody in round one. They're never going to do that. So what is the point? It's not the worst thing in the world, but I just think it's different in baseball. When so few teams get in, you're still going to have good teams playing those play-in games in Major League Baseball. You're going to have crappy games in the NBA. And furthermore, somebody might actually pull out a victory that probably shouldn't be in the playoffs. So I just think it's sort of, I mean, again, it's crass commercialism, all for making more money, and if you want to televise it. I just don't think it's really good for the sport. And again, in terms of the conference thing, reseeding, I just like the idea of having a conference. I don't see the point in having conferences if you're just going to ruin it at the end of the day. Why change something that doesn't need to be changed, for God's sake?
Well, so that, rather than debating the ins and outs of each particular one, which I actually do find entertaining, but really isn't necessarily the theme of why we would discuss this story, what you just mentioned really is the sports business crux of the question, regardless of what they are and our feelings on them. Is this an overreaction to incomplete data? And the incomplete data is something we talked about in the last show. Are they overreacting to a slight dip in the ratings? Are they overreacting to some, hashtag okay boomer reactions to the NBA in general? Is this an over course correct to try to solve problems that they don't necessarily have? And that's the interesting business question.
Yeah, and of course, obviously, yes. Clearly, it is a reaction to that. In terms, a play-in game is going to make money, and that everybody be a winner in that regard. There's no doubt. But this reseeding the conference thing, I think you sort of have to take the long view from a business side and just accept that there's going to be some years where the conference finals are just not going to be as good as others if you don't reseed, And so I guess from a business perspective, the theory is we're going to keep ratings higher if you reseed, so you can result in a higher quality NBA finals. I guess that's the theory. The traditionalist in me does not like that. The traditionalist in me doesn't like it. But strictly from a money perspective, yeah, it probably makes sense. And so I can't believe that twice in 10 minutes I'm going to say that money is not more there's something more important than money. It bothers me and it hurts my soul that I've said this. But I like the tradition better. But I understand why they're doing it. And by the way, just to get this before we move on, before I forget, this tournament I still think is a freaking stupid idea.
Well, that totally.
Yeah, and the reason why it's dumb, in case anybody's asking, is it means nothing. No coach is going to care about this tournament at all. No players are going to care about it except because they may make some more money. But it does nothing. It has no effect on the season whatsoever. So, I mean, if I were a coach, I'd play my third string players in this tournament. And if we went out, we went out. Because God help us if Anthony Davis gets hurt in the tournament, blows a knee out, and is unable to play the rest of the season. What a disaster that would be. And that will happen at some point. So the tournament is just beyond stupid. They need to just stop. But yeah, from a business perspective, the idea here is clearly to generate a better NBA Finals, which in turn would boost ratings. Very clearly, that's the point here.
Yeah, for sure. And it's interesting about the tournament. Well, not interesting, but The NBA has actually been pretty successful, occasionally stealing and seeing what works well in Division One and men's NCAA basketball. And this obviously is something that's inspired by that. Traditionally pre New Year, the NBA does a lot of weird tournaments. Sorry, excuse me. The NCAA does a lot of weird tournaments, and they don't really start playing conference games until after the new year, although that's changing. So there's a much more of a barnstorming element to college basketball, mostly because the schools and the coaches get to make up their schedule outside of their conference games. So there is what makes sense financially, what makes sense as a regional, a rivalry, what tournaments can we get in that become part of our culture. So, but that's a much different vantage point about why that's happened and why that's successful than would ever be relevant in the NBA. So I don't that just seems like such a strange thing to pull up from the men's college basketball culture into NBA culture. It makes just zero sense. And you're right, it would just be a mockery of who to start, when, where, and why. And if you want to do some extraneous tournaments, then look at off-season stuff with international play or something. There's some ways to do that. I think it would still be kind of silly, but there are ways to do that doesn't have to be a circus show in the middle of your regular season.
Yeah, no, absolutely true. Now, tournament culture is a part of basketball culture, all the way up through, high school. So that's where these college tournaments comes in. But you said the key factor here. The NCAA tournaments come at the very beginning of the season. It's almost like their preseason. The records count, but it's sort of their preseason. What Adam Silver's talking about is stopping everything in the middle of the season and having a tournament. Now, baseball did this. Baseball kind of does this. They have this World Series of Baseball thing that has gone on occasionally, and they stopped play for that, at least once or twice.
But wasn't that preseason play?
I thought it was in the
regular season.
Am I wrong? Maybe I'm wrong. I thought it was in the middle of the regular season at one point. I could be wrong. Okay, don't hold me to that then. Perhaps I'm wrong. I didn't hockey stop in the middle of the season once to go send everybody to the Olympics. One time.
Well, they did that.
Yeah,
they did it multiple times. This past Winter Olympics was the first year in probably 6 Olympics they stopped doing it.
Yeah, but the Olympics are a different story, though. I mean, stopping the regular season to have a tournament with the same teams that are playing themselves anyway. Only the games don't count towards the record, towards the in-season record, so it doesn't count towards playoff seeding. I just can't imagine any team at all would care about it. It's going to become a big joke. The NBA would promote it. Promote the heck out of it on TV and come watch our tournament. And you're probably going to have it in Vegas, or somewhere like that. So they're going to try to turn it into a destination, but ultimately it's something that doesn't matter. So I think ultimately it would probably fail because no matter how much you promote it, you can't make it matter. That's the problem. You cannot make it matter.
In all sports, but pro sports at the top of the food chain, stakes matter. That's why you're invested. If there's no stakes, then who cares? Look at All-Star game ratings and interest or whatever. There has to be stakes, and so this makes. Why would anyone care, from the fan to the coach to the player to the individual franchises, and to get them to care, they're going to have to put some gimmick like a benefit in the. I don't know what it would be.
Well, it could be like a stake in the seeding for the playoffs or something. But then you're going to throw off, the process that you have now, and it won't make any sense because you could have some team luck out and win a tournament that's going to end up being a 5th seed, and you're going to guarantee home games or something for a 5th seed. They're going to have to play the number ones. It wouldn't make any sense.
No, all those fixes would just worsen the problem.
That's why everybody hated the MLB All-Star games, because you turned a fictional, exhibition into something that matters, and and it comes back to haunt you later in the playoffs. It's dumb for the same reason. So personally, I don't think any of this makes sense. I could see if you're trying to reduce the season for load management reasons, I could see how it would help the players, but it wouldn't help the business at all, obviously, because they're losing money to do that. So that's never going to happen. So if you're just going to these two things working in concert with each other makes no sense to me. And for that matter, there's probably going to be, let's see, you're going to have a 30-team tournament, right? So there's going to be more than 4 games for some teams, and so you're actually going to end up having these guys play more games, not less. Some of them.
Yeah, that makes no sense.
Yeah.
And if I can see that, I understand what the NBA is doing. They see the tea leaves. They see some problems in their sport. They want to see growth. They see maybe it's even they see opportunities for growth. It's not necessarily from a deficit perspective. But they're not looking at the right things. The right things are the competitive balance of their league and how they handle personnel movement. And the NBA was innovating with the Larry Bird rule, but that's gotten stale. It's not as relevant anymore, or it needs updating in and of itself. Like, that's where they should be concentrating their innovations, is how they ensure competitive balance. And that's where you could also take on load management issues. Do you expand the rosters by a player? There's much different ways to fix what I think are probably their fundamental problems than gimmicks with their schedule, even the gimmicks that I happen to like.
Yeah, listen, the players have too much power in the NBA. Sorry to say it, and here's where my conservative political bent is going to come in. The reason why the competitive balance in the NBA is so out of whack is that the players have too much power to switch teams. You may hate the salary cap in the NFL because it's a hard cap. Not you, Chris. The generic you. But the fact of the matter is that's what keeps the competitive balance in the NFL going. In the NBA, the way that there's basically a phony salary cap. There's basically no salary cap because there's so many ways to get around it. If you had a hard cap, you couldn't have the Miami Heatles teams from 10 years ago. You couldn't have all these guys pairing up, in LA and in Brooklyn and, the junior varsity team in LA, the Clippers, all these teams pairing up with a bunch of high money guys. You couldn't have that if there was a hard cap. So if you really want to fix competitive balance in the NBA, put a hard cap in. Hard cap. That would keep everybody from being able to spend a ton of money. I think it would help tremendously. It would make the owners happy, for sure, because they would have to spend less money. The only people that would be less happy about it would be the players, and I would suggest they would just need to get over it. So if it were me, the way to fix the whole thing would be hard salary cap, to me.
It's definitely on any short list of ways. There are others, or there are ways to bundle a few, but yeah. And NBA and NHL are always great comps because they just have a very similar structure on almost all things. And one thing they don't is the NHL has the hardest cap in pro sports, to the point where a team that gets into a little bit of injury trouble at the end of the season may not be able to make moves. It's hard for them to make moves to even keep their roster. So,
well, the NFL also has a hard cap too.
Hard, but not as restrictive as the NHL.
No, it is it may be a bigger cap, but there is no method through which an NFL team can exceed the cap under any circumstances. You can't. You cannot. There's just more money. The cap is bigger, so you can keep some room to make some moves, probably. Whereas in the NHL cap, it sounds like it's a lower cap and harder to make moves. But it's the same. It is the same restrictive rules in both instances.
Yes, for sure. But since the NBA and NHL share so much similar structural DNA, you would see a very distinct way it would play out if the NBA had anything remotely close to the NHL's cap.
Yeah. Yeah. That I agree with. But make no mistake, the NFL has a absolute 100% hard cap. Period.
Yeah. So those are if they really want, in my opinion, if they really think they've got cracks in the armor, that's the direction that they should be thinking about.
It's really and truly, in the case of the NBA, this is like an alpha male versus a beta male thing. The NBA ownership is the beta male in the relationship. And the NBA Players Association is the alpha male. I mean, the NBA spends so much time trying to coddle and make their players happy that they are getting away from what actually matters to make a viable league that is as most competitive as possible. The NBA ownership really needs to start putting their foot down and stop trying to make these players happy. They're making, in some cases, 9 figures. They'll be fine, I promise. Do some things that'll help the competitive balance of the league, and no matter what the players think, and the league will be stronger ultimately for it. How
For
about
sure.
that, Chris? Now, is this back to my normal self?
Always the union buster.
Well, yeah,
Um,
yeah, that's exactly right. Bust the union, screw the union, and the league will be better, I promise. There you go.
all right, so with that, we will move on from the NBA here in late December. And we'll go on to, well, why don't we go on to this Las Vegas story, since we do have an interesting bridge, because, Steve kind of gave it a little bit of an aside, but part of the NBA plans is how do we get some of that Vegas action, baby, and with the idea of possibly putting a tournament there and really blowing it out. And this next story has the creeping, influence is the right word, the creeping presence of Las Vegas in all things sports, which of course it always had its place, but now its place is actually in hosting teams, growing its market, and being, as gambling becomes more mainstream, Las Vegas's entry back into the world of a viable sports city franchise, which it had been held at arm's length for many, many years. So what's this latest version of this story?
Yeah, okay. So the latest version of the story here is that the Pac-12 is really getting in bed with Las Vegas. Now, the people who run Las Vegas, which in no small part is their Visitors and Convention Authority, has really cozied up generally to sports in a way that they never have before because, as Chris said, it's been basically taboo for decades. And now gambling is becoming more mainstream. It's becoming more acceptable because people, have slowly cared more about money than they have about the ethics of betting, and so that's why sports is generally speaking getting in bed with Las Vegas. So what Pac-12 is doing here, Pac-12 is they are having conference tournaments in Vegas. They've always done this to a certain extent. It goes all the way back to 2001, but the Pac-12 championship game is not going to be in Vegas. Now, there's no Pac-12 team in Nevada at all, but you've got all the California teams, Oregon, Washington. It's a destination for West Coast people, and so the theory goes, a perfect fit between the West Coast-based Pac-12 and the city of Nevada. So what you're going to see is the Pac-12 championship game in Las Vegas. They would never have done this a couple decades ago, even 10 years ago. But as Chris said, now that gambling has become more mainstream, this is all of a sudden okay. I mean, notice what Vegas has done in the past, 5 years? They've attracted an NHL team. They convinced the Raiders to move there. They've got the Pac-12 is about to move in there. They have the NBA's Summer League goes on in Vegas. There's a lot of things going on in Vegas now. Don't be surprised if they try to attract an MLB team at some point in time. MLB's a little bit stodgier than other leagues, so it may take a while. But Vegas is really, the people who run Las Vegas, like I said, have really taken a very proactive approach to billing themselves as a destination. Because what the Pac-12 is a good theory here. You have a championship game, you bring in 100,000 fans who have a nice weekend in Vegas. It's the adult Disneyland. You have a championship game, everybody makes a lot of money. So that's the theory. Just it was always there. Just people were always afraid of it before.
For sure, and there's a couple of factors here too. In general, one, with the mainstreaming of gambling, it also means that Las Vegas is no longer a gambling destination necessarily. If I wanted, well, from where I sit right now in Catskills, New York, I literally can travel no more than 11 miles to get to a full casino. Right? And that doesn't even count things like Atlantic City, other things which are also fairly close. So this idea that Vegas is a destination for strictly gambling is just reducing. And so Vegas is looking to build, because it is the adult Disneyland, and it's been smartly doing this for decades already, diversifying why people, they want to maintain their destination with not having gambling being the main draw. So that's one of the reasons they want to expand these kinds of entertainment offerings. And so pro sports is at the top of any food chain. So you can see why they're making these moves. Also, pre-housing bubble burst, no urban area in America had grown as fast and has built as much housing as the Las Vegas area. Now, obviously,
it went boom, and Vegas was hit very hard.
It did, right, because they overexpanded. But these things are cyclical, and they're starting to come back, and there's still a lot of homes there, and it did still go through a great amount of expansion. So it's become a legitimate market in other ways than just the gambling issue. So, I can see why they want some of the legitimacy to act like any other major urban market would in the country. So there's ways in which the Vegas elders, so to speak, the people that have, run and thought about long-term growth for their market, have positioned themselves to be ready and to be aggressive in these spaces, in large part because they knew or they saw that people can gamble anywhere now, which means why go to Vegas? They had to diversify why people would come. This doesn't bother me that much. I'm on record many times as saying that. And we're just, it's going to get to the point where we can do versions of this story at any time. And to Steve's point, there are very few places set up in America to handle big, glitzy events like Las Vegas of any kind.
Yeah, I mean, but before this, it was a facilities problem. There wasn't really a viable football stadium that was there. There's going to be now that the Raiders are moving in. And gambling isn't as prevalent everywhere, okay? Just to be clear. I mean, like for me here in Houston, Texas, I'd have to drive a couple hours into Louisiana to find a casino. I'm not aware of any Native American casinos in Texas that are anywhere near me at all. So, I mean, I can't drive
Steve,
11 miles.
25 years ago, you either get on a plane to Atlantic City or Vegas. So
but here's my point, though. Here's my point. The allure of Vegas is not gambling. The allure of Vegas is the adult Disneyland aspect of it. Because if you're going to bet on sports and corrupt sports through betting and you're a player, you don't need to be in Vegas to do that. You can do it. You can do it from your phone. And do it. If you want to bet, if you're a player on a professional sports team, you want to bet on your own team, you don't need to be in Vegas to do it. So there's really no point in keeping sports out of Vegas just to protect sports from the gambling element. Because the mafia, if the mafia, whoever runs illegal sports book gambling wants to approach you, they're going to do it anywhere. So I think it was sort of an outdated trope, really, to keep sports out of Vegas to protect sports from gambling. That's my point.
My point is just that. Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, well, I think the bigger problem to me in Vegas is, I don't know how you have home teams in Vegas. I think it's more of it's a better destination for these sort of Pac-12 style tournaments or games than having a home team. I don't know how the Raiders are going to do in Vegas because the population of Vegas itself isn't that big. So you have to sort of rely on Southern California to support the Raiders because you're not going to draw 80,000 home fans to Raiders games in Vegas. I don't think the population supports that. So you're just sort of hoping for destination visitors or that Southern California is just going to adopt the Raiders. In a way that they, did, 15 years ago when the Raiders were in L.A. And there's already two other home teams in Los Angeles right now. So the idea of sort of a redheaded stepchild in Vegas is a bit much to ask. So that's the problem with sports in Vegas to me is I just don't know if it's a viable place for a home team to really survive.
I think it probably is, to be honest, and I think it's bigger. And I think it's bigger than a lot of places that they put teams in the last 25 years, or probably even. And maybe if it's not all pure population size, is going to have a bigger appetite than some of these other markets. And the Golden Knights have done well. So that the canary in the coal mine there, which is the sort of junior league of the 3 or the 4 major pro ones, has done well. So the canary didn't die. Let's see, it might be safe for the rest of us. we'll see. I mean, that it may take us a decade, may take us 2 decades, but that's the bet.
Yeah. Okay. So, population of Nevada 644,000. The entire metro area 2.2 million. So I mean, it's small. It would be a small market. I don't doubt that I don't doubt that the Golden Knights could fill an arena. There's just a huge difference between a football stadium and what the numbers you have to make an NHL team work, and the numbers you have to make an NFL team work are vastly different.
No, of course, but I'm saying they must see enough trends there that they like to take the next step.
Well, that and Steve Wynn wrote a gigantic check.
Right. Well,
to the Davis
that's
family.
That's part of it.
And I think the Raiders truly are sort of foregoing. It's kind of a big middle finger to their home fans to a certain extent, because they're moving to Vegas knowing that their games are going to be a destination, because you're going to have a heavy travel schedule, a heavy travel away team presence every game for the Raiders. Because what would be better than going to see your team play in Vegas for a weekend? You come and you hang out in Vegas, you spend a fortune, on the hotels and the money. You go see a game on Sunday, you go home on Monday, and so you're going to have a very heavy away team presence just as a built-in automatic. And I think the Raiders obviously they know that, so they're sort of sacrificing a bit of a home field advantage on the altar of money into the owner's hands, which is his right to do, but I think it's kind of an FU to the Raiders fans to a certain extent.
Well, I can't disagree with that. I feel bad. I don't care about pro football team in Las Vegas, whatever, fine. I wish it had been an expansion team or a team or a city that truly deserved to lose its team rather than. And partly is they know Raider Nation to a large degree because of their moves in the past is kind of a universal fan base. So like in some ways they're the team to try it because they know that they'll kind of keep a lot of those Northern California fans. They've kept them once already. So, and they'll be part of that constant flow of out of towners too. They'll make, enough people will make it a destination that are Raiders fans. Well,
Maybe
that's part of their gamble.
See,
sure.
part of what made the Raiders successful when they moved to LA is they became the sort of hip team in LA. Remember?
Yeah.
They didn't necessarily just keep Oakland. They adopted an entire new city, and they were embraced by the city of Los Angeles. The hip hop culture back in the '80s adopted the Raiders. In a way that may not be the case. Here today. And the other thing is,
and I think they didn't.
The current owner
lose those fans, so they think that trend will continue.
Maybe. I'm not so convinced as you are, I guess. And the other thing here is I think Mark Davis, who's the owner, is he's kind of the dumber, the dumber son of Al Davis. Al Davis was a maverick and a rebel and all that, but he was also very smart, and he knew exactly what he was doing. He just did things in a way that was completely opposite of what everybody wanted him to do, but he knew what he was doing. Mark Davis isn't his father. I don't think he's all that bright. He's inherited wealth, but I don't think he's inherited his dad's flair and intelligence, if you will. So I don't know if this is going to work long term for the team. I think it'll work for the money aspect of it because they'll fill the stadium. But I just don't know if they're ever going to be able to build a fan base in the same way that they could in LA and or Oakland. That's all.
Yeah. And like I said, we're not gonna know 2 years from now even necessarily.
No. Yeah, we're talking decade from now.
Yeah, and the one interesting thing here about the economics of the NFL, especially in terms of stadiums, is that the one thing that they'll definitely be able to do is they will sell out those top tier suites, boxes, all that like other cities can't. Just because
in
of
a heartbeat. Yeah.
And so that's part of the that's part of the calculus of the economics of the NFL is how do you maximize that in your stadium?
Well, that's kind of like I said, it's sort of an FU to the fan base to a certain extent. It's one thing to have for the Pac-10 to come in there, which is where we started with this, or Pac-12 rather, to come in and say we're going to have a championship game in there, and there's a possibility of other events. There'll be some Pac-12 basketball tournaments and stuff in there. That's wholly different than moving a major NFL franchise in there. Wholly different. thing
Yeah.
entirely. So,
And by the time they start playing there, and we have all these other things, and the Golden Knights, I mean, 5 years from now, we'll see. In some ways, we'll see because they'll be all in, right? They'll have the giant tentpole NFL franchise. They'll have they'll have they'll have their kind of 80 games a year or whatever sport. They'll have a bunch of tournament stuff. They'll be as established as any sports market in the country.
yeah, I mean, you won't convince me that half that stadium won't be Seattle Seahawks fans or Dallas Cowboy fans or Patriots fans. The fans that travel well are going to travel doubly well to Vegas.
A little irony coming from us Redskins fans.
Yeah, because we have 30,000 fans in our stadium, of which 25,000 are the opposing team.
So we speak from psychic pain. All right. Let's move on to. We go from the pseudo reality of Vegas to the full unreality of the WWE sports entertainment package. But some pretty interesting news. We've talked about the WWE before. It's obviously not quote unquote real sports. Although with the XFL, and because that's all part of that same holding, that's even starting to become more complicated. And there was some reports of some earnings down and some blah, blah, blah. And really interesting take, because some of the hot takes on this was, is the WWE in trouble? But actually, if you just scratch a little bit under the surface, you actually see some pretty smart business plays. They may not work, right? Like, just because something's smart doesn't mean it's going to work necessarily. But you see some really interesting strategic planning from the WWE, which I think explain why they take some short-term loss.
Yeah, I think fundamentally the issue here, recall when we talked about the WWE 18 months ago or something, what we told you was that they were moving to Fox. They're moving their flagship show to Fox because it was on USA Network. And so the idea being there's a much larger audience available, obviously on a network television, on a network than on USA, which is a cable channel. Well, as it turns out, the ratings sort of show that the fan base for WWE hasn't really grown in the U.S. on the basis of Fox. They just sort of brought along the people they had in the first place. And so the ratings are disappointing in that respect because it has not grown exponentially despite being on a major network like Fox. Now, the ratings are down in part because there's a bunch of other things going on. They're moving into the Middle East. Who I didn't even realize that. So they're waiting on some other things to come along. So I don't think the WWE's in trouble. I don't think that it's really the effect of moving to Fox hasn't really been what they expected, but they're waiting on a whole bunch of other things. There's a WWE network. That the price point is $10 a month, which is higher than most of these other networks. WWE claims that they're providing more content, and so it's better. And so you ought to pay for it anyway, which hasn't happened yet. But it'll build. And all this stuff needs to build. And so they're sort of at step 2 of 20 in terms of really building the global brand of WWE and take it to the next level.
Yeah, it's really fascinating if you just think about watching a company, and we've talked about this difference before in other ways. So something like NASCAR is an interesting comp, right? Because we have sports leagues that are essentially some kind of federated system. Your NFLs, your NBAs, they all have somewhat different ways they operate, but they have individual owned franchises as part of the league. Well, something like WWE or NASCAR, they're owned by one entity. They control all aspects of that. And obviously there's nuance in all of this. But so you see what WWE is doing in terms of their strategic growth, and it's very textbook, right? If we look at the top line, bullet pointed, bold parts of their strategic plan, expand international markets. That takes time and money and effort. So Middle East is fascinating that they've they've chosen that. And they must have good indicators that that's going to do well for them or could do well for them. So
That surprises me a lot. The Middle East
yeah,
surprises me.
I'd love to see their reasoning. I'll trust that they have good reasoning. I don't think you would pick that at random, so I'll trust that they had a rationale. So that's one. They're expanding international markets. They're expanding their product offerings. They are launching a football league. It could be a spectacular failure. It has before.
Wait, hold on a minute. WWE is not launching a football network.
Well,
Vince McMahon is launching a football network that is not our league, that is not affiliated with WWE specifically. It just has common ownership.
Yeah, but come on.
Well, I mean, I'm serious because there's been no evidence that there's a marriage between WWE and the XFL.
But
we're talking about the XFL here.
Yeah, Vince McMahon sits at the top, so he's understanding those two things as in where he's going.
Maybe. I mean,
Maybe.
I've just seen
Right.
no indication of it so far.
Yeah, except for that it's Vince McMahon. So
Yeah.
that's pretty big. And they're 1/2 season into a new TV deal. You know, like of course they were only going to bring, you know, the first year of their Fox contract was only going to bring the diehards. The idea of being on, and by the way, they still are on USA, so they kept a property on USA.
Yeah, this is just their flagship WWE SmackDown show is now on Fox. The properties are still on USA or USA Network. Yeah.
So they're just expanding the surface area, and all these things are about growing new fans. So you're going to grow new fans on Fox. You know, there's always another 8-year-old boy to discover pro wrestling. That's the beauty of the market.
And you're going to have more 8-year-old boys who can discover it because it's on a major network now.
I guarantee you they're not super concerned about the ratings they're getting in their first fall. I think it's
no. I think they'd be pretty happy about it, frankly, that it didn't fall.
Right, they maintained, and now they've got a much larger area of growth. That was their plan.
Yeah. So, I mean, it's a bit of a fallacy to say that anything's been a failure. They're growing. They're in definite expansion mode. I personally, like you said, I don't really understand the Middle East thing at all, but they have a plan. Otherwise, they wouldn't be doing it. And Vince McMahon, even though he's showbiz and bluster, he and the other people running WWE are actually very smart. They've built it. You know what? They think about this over sort of a master 25 or so year history. You know what? They had a major competitor, WCW, back in like the 80s and 90s. They crushed WCW. Absolutely annihilated them. WCW, I don't even know if it exists anymore. If it does, it's not to any great extent.
There's a new upstart league just came out to try to challenge them. But pro wrestling, and I've been a fan over the years, and I like some of the cultural history of it. It was a regional, it was another barnstorming type thing. It was hyper regional. And so then by the time, like, basically Steve and I were kids, you had a couple competing leagues, and the WWF was starting to emerge as the big one. But yeah, he destroyed the culture. I don't even mean that. He brought his league to dominance where it killed the regional culture of pro wrestling. That does not exist. Killed the idea of multiple leagues and remained, all enter, one leave type of mentality. That's pretty impressive from a business standpoint. Also, he survived a massive forced rebranding.
Yeah, don't forget that.
Lots of companies can't survive that.
Originally, it was what Chris. I almost thought you slipped up there for a minute, but you brought it in intentionally. It was the WWF years ago, and then they got sued by the World Wildlife Federation over the acronym WWF. So they had to rebrand themselves as Sports Entertainment as the WWE, which is Worldwide Wrestling Entertainment. I think is what it stands for.
Who knows?
Yeah, but back in the 80s and 90s. The WCW was a legitimate competitor. They had a significant number of stars. And what McMahon did is he bought all of them. He bought every star. And so now it is the premier wrestling league without competition. And so what has he done? He's brought himself and his product from a small regional thing to the premier league in wrestling league in the property in the United States, and now they're expanding worldwide. It's domination. They've done a brilliant job in marketing themselves. I'm not like you. I watched a little bit of wrestling when I was a kid. I'm not a huge fan of it necessarily. I did follow along to a certain extent, but what WWE has done with their property is very impressive from a business standpoint as a long-term growth. So if anybody's doubting Vince McMahon to make it work on Fox and make the WWE streaming network work and make it work in the Middle East or something, don't doubt this dude. Do not doubt him, because he has done wonders with the WWE now. And the other thing, by the way, the other thing he survived is not, years ago nobody would admit that it was fake, right? The WWE didn't admit it was fake. They billed themselves as legit for a while. They were billing themselves as a legitimate sports network. What they did is they transitioned wrestling into an acceptable. Everybody knows it's fake. They admit it's scripted, and yet it's still acceptable. They've turned themselves into a phony real sports league to an acceptable form of entertainment while still growing. It's impressive what they've done.
And launched the careers of 3 huge pop culture.
Who are The Rock, obviously.
The Rock.
Who are the other
Hulk
two?
Hogan.
Oh yeah, Hogan.
And what's the dude? He acts a ton. Not Steve Austin. Blonde guy.
Stone Cold Steve Austin?
Yeah, I guess it is Steve Austin. No, it's not him.
No.
Another guy who's the voice of the bull in that cartoon movie, and he's in a bunch of movies. He's not that big. He's actually a pretty big star. I just can't think of his name. But either way, those are 3 people that they've placed in, in major entertainment. So it also creates a pipeline.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So I just don't think anybody needs to doubt. It's way too early to say that there's a problem with Fox or anything like that. It's way too early for that. I just refuse to bet against Vince McMahon anymore.
Yeah, okay, now this is killing me. So
yeah, I know. I'm trying to look it up here, too. We're going to find out. Okay, you got it?
Yeah, I'll get it in a second. I'm on the case.
Okay, well, because I was sitting there thinking, I can't imagine. Certainly The Rock is number 1 by far, but Hulk Hogan is a person who has entered this consciousness as somebody outside of just wrestling. His problem is he's getting old. And he had a bunch of personal problems and whatnot. He sued Gawker.
Criminal stuff.
Yeah, he sued Gawker over that sex tape. We talked about that on this show. But The Rock is really the one who's made the major transition. And he's sort of never forgotten his wrestling roots either, No,
he goes back a couple times a year.
Yeah, and he just had a movie, several months ago that was about. He was playing a fictionalized version of himself as a wrestler, So anyway, I don't doubt Vince McMahon, and I also don't doubt the XFL really either, just because McMahon tried this once. He failed at it. He's learned. It sounds like he's learned from it. So I just have to think that I think he's probably smart to keep the XFL away from wrestling for now. Give it 10 years and we'll see if there's a connection. I'm babbling because I can see Chris is still looking, can't find what he's talking about here.
This is driving me crazy. I found everything but this freaking name.
There's also an untapped market in Asia. Just wait till you see WWE.
Wrestling's huge in Asia.
Yeah, but there's a Japanese pro wrestling league, okay? Just wait till the WWE crushes them someday.
He's probably looking to do the same things with international regions, Japan, Mexico, that he did with U.S. leagues, right? Like, how does he crush them? Oh, John Cena. Woo! It's going to go crazy.
Okay, yeah. I think he's certainly in third place of those 3 guys.
Well, he's had more Hollywood success than Hulk Hogan, but
Hogan's just old. That's his problem. Hogan's getting up there in age.
And Hulk Hogan stayed relevant for going on 40 years.
Long time. Yeah. Yeah, but I think that if you want to talk about the long-term future of WWE, what I think the goal probably is to have worldwide domination as the only major wrestling league worldwide. And so then you have your champion be truly a world champion. Because if you don't know this, I mean, what's happened in decades past is, like if you go back to, I don't know, Hulk Hogan and Andre the Giant, for example, they had a bunch of matches in Asia that had different results than the matches in the United States. and they would send the top wrestlers over to Asia to wrestle Asian wrestlers. They would get beat by the Asian wrestlers over there, and then they would come over in the United States and claim that they're undefeated. Still in Andre the Giant's case. So it was they've always tapped into the market, but not in a way where it's sort of a contiguous league, if you will. And I think that's probably the long-term goal, is to have WWE be the worldwide domination premier wrestling brand all around the world. That is Vince McMahon's ultimate goal, I think.
Yeah, and he's a hard guy. He's a hard guy to bet against.
Yeah.
Well,
absolutely.
John Cena's got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 movies coming out between 2020 and 2022, including joining the Suicide Squad and Fast and Furious franchises.
Okay, so he's becoming more of a major star than I thought.
Yeah, he's a little bit of the Rock Jr., yeah.
The Rock Jr. The Rock is the biggest guy in Hollywood. You may make fun of his movies out there. The dude is the biggest star in Hollywood.
Oh, of course.
By far, and it's not
without
close.
a doubt. And no
Yeah.
one even laughs at his. No one even thinks he's bad. Like, in fact, I think I would be surprised if he does a critically acclaimed movie at some point. In fact, critics even love his popcorn movies. So he's sort of winning on all fronts.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right.
wrestling.
Well, when we're talking about pro wrestling and Hollywood, we know we've reached the end of Steve's patience.
I can't do it anymore, people.
So, Steve, why don't you tell the listeners what's going on in Hogsty Land?
Okay, we are still part of the Big Heads Media Network, so check out their shows if you want to listen to a podcast on any topic you could possibly think of. It will be there in some form or fashion in Big Heads. The Hogsty, we have mercifully reached the end of this painful Redskin season, so we are going to be transitioning to one show a week for the off season for that. So check us out. And frankly, sometimes those shows are more fun to do than the never-ending, drag of recap, post and pre and post game of a 13-loss season. So check us out there. Rick Snyder has got his show, Seasons of Discontent, which is his look at Washington, D.C. sports and life. Check that out. And we have all sorts of great written content almost every single day.
All right, and you can find me at ChrisLarry33, or It's Just Business Pod, or obviously the Hogsty. And so we will see you in 2 weeks. Enjoy the kickoff to 2 things here, NFL related: the NFL postseason and the NFL firing season. So enjoy.
Black Monday.
All right, bye.
Always a great time of year.